Add to stream. There we go. All right. Hey. I want to welcome you to my one of my first Facebook Lives here from my own private studio. Yeah, pretty happy about that. So, my name is Dr. Tread Rissacker, and I'm a doctor of chiropractic, and I've been in practice now for 34 years. I originally got started in chiropractic because of my dad. He had been in practice for 50 years before I even became a chiropractor. So he'd been doing it a long time. And, when I always, since a kid, when I was a kid, I'd always wanted to grow up. I wanted to be a chiropractor. I knew it from the beginning. It was never any other choice for me. So as I grew up in the chiropractic family, I ended up becoming a chiropractor, and I graduated from Cleveland Chiropractic College in 1988. And of course, I went up to work for my dad, and he was in New York, and I stayed there. He stayed there for 2 more years, kind of giving me an orientation and turning the reins over to me. And then finally, he retired to Sebastian, Florida, and I took over his practice. And it was great. The only thing I really had to do was answer the phone. He'd been there for 50 years. He had such a huge base of people that it was just a matter of, like I said, answering the phone, showing up, and it was wonderful. I had a great time, learned a lot. And then I came back to South Florida right after 9/11. It seemed like living in New York, you were a target for airplanes and stuff. So my family, is in Stewart. So it was important for me to get back to where my family was. My brothers, my sisters, my mom and dad had separated when we were younger, although my dad did live in Sebastian. So in 2004, basically, I started practice again right here in Stewart. I started on Stewart, right at the Monterey and US1 Plaza there, where the Home Goods is, and the TJ Maxx. And there was a little hearing center, hearing RX store that we turned into my first chiropractic office. And I started with no people, and within about a year, I had built it up to over 100 to 150 a week in that little 2 rooms, sharing, it was no room at all. And I had the opportunity to move into a larger space there it's in the corner there in the breezeway. When you walk through, it used to be called the Golden Buffet. Excuse me. And they had half of the restaurant that they didn't use. And it was huge. It was like 4,000 square feet. And it had big high ceilings. And long story short, the landlord built it out for me. And I moved my practice from that hearing center into that other area there, that new space. And it was clean. It was beautiful. I had a wide open layout where there wasn't any more individual rooms. We had rehab in there. And within 2 years, I was up to 300, 350 people a week taking care of families. And, as time progresses, I was introduced to lasers. And the laser therapy that I was introduced to is what I do today. And it's something that I never, ever thought that I would not be practicing chiropractic until, my last breath. But these lasers were so interesting to me, and they were so incredibly, no one was using them. And I just couldn't believe that something like light would have so many beneficial effects on somebody. You could help somebody with so many different conditions. And let's be honest, I've been a chiropractor for a long time, and I've watched and witnessed, a chiropractor's office is usually the last block on, it's the last house they go to. They exhaust their friends' recommendations, what should I do? How can I get better? And then this is before people went online, and they would ask other people, and then they'd go to their family doctor who might give them some medication and might recommend some x-rays. And, if that doesn't work, they go to the orthopedic who doesn't want to operate right away. So they will do physical therapy. But since neither medical doctors, physical therapists, or orthopedics deal with alignment, deal with the structural alignment, which is the cause of the breakdown of the back of your nervous system. When your bones are in alignment, everything is good and hunky-dory, but you suffer a fall, an injury, an auto accident, you hold the phone too long in your ear, and you can subluxate and cause misalignments in your spine. And oftentimes you don't feel it. Most of the times you will not feel it. So it's hard for somebody to realize, why is my hand hurting when I didn't do anything to my hand? Well, because the nerve that feeds your hand emanates from the neck, and those bones can get out of alignment and you don't feel it go out of alignment, but the nerve is being pinched and irritated by the misalignment, and thus your hand starts to hurt. Or it could be a stomach problem. You didn't realize that, you'd picked up that heavy weight or, heavy trash bag and leaned over the car and felt maybe a little pull in your back, in the middle of between your shoulder blades, and nothing much, you rest, it seemed like a muscle strain. Well, those vertebra, your thoracic vertebra, they can get pulled out of alignment. And when they get pulled out of alignment, they can pinch the nerve, and oftentimes it's very subtle where you don't feel it. I can't stress that enough. Most people who have horrible back problems due to misalignments and subluxations never being corrected had very little warning or knowledge of the injury when it first happened, because it's accumulative. It accumulates over time until we start, going back and forth to doctors trying to find some help for this pain. And because the nerve system goes through your spinal cord and it controls all of your bodily functions, from your glandular function to your eliminative functions, to how your nervous system works, to your digestive system, to your neurological, the nerves and the circulation and muscles are all connected to the brain, to the organs, to the body parts, and it all has to travel through your spine. And what can happen is those little misalignments, whether they're at the top of your neck or down in your tailbone, if they're not pushed back into place, if something isn't done to correct it, and that's what a chiropractor does, we correct these misalignments. And then when you do that, the body is able to repair itself, its functions, and it works better. It would be like, suppose you had bought a brand new, beautiful car and you estimated a curve, and you hit the curve with the front tire, and that you possibly misaligned it. You knocked it out of alignment. And then you notice your tire is wearing unevenly, and it's not, it's shaking when you go to brake it. Are you going to ignore that alignment and just put a new tire on it, or take the car in to be exchanged or repaired, fixed or replaced? You're going to fix the alignment. And when you fix the alignment, the car and the tire doesn't wear out prematurely. Well, your spine is the same way. When you have these little injuries to your neck and your back and your alignment, and it goes out of place, there's no mechanism that pops it back into place. You don't have an automatic vertebral realignment structure built in your body. Once it goes out of place, it stays out of place. And then the body begins to adapt and to get used to that bone out of alignment. And it's fine as long as we don't lift too much, or we don't put too much stress on ourselves, or we don't travel a long way on an airplane, or, we don't go bouncing around in the boat. But any little thing what normally wouldn't hurt you, but you become vulnerable to these injuries, to these onsets, because of the alignment is busted. It's out of alignment, so your body doesn't work as well. And an analogy for that would be a crane, a big steel crane that would pick up heavy loads. And if you think of a crane, you think of the boom, and it's holding it picks up the weight. And let's say it's rated for 20 tons, as long as all the cables and the boom is straight. But what if somebody came in and accidentally bent the boom? So instead of it being straight, it has a kink in it. Now, it wasn't enough to destroy the cables. The mechanism still worked. It could still pick things up, but it can't pick up 20 tons anymore. It could bear, you get 5 tons and the whole thing starts to creak, and it's designed to do 20 tons. Well, what's wrong? Is it the motor? It could be. Is it the cables? It might be. But the glaring obvious thing is the boom is bent. And now the levers and the moments of action, which is, physics, says that's a weak spot. And when we overstress the crane, that area is going to kink even more, and that's the problem. That is such a great analogy of people that have back problems and they don't really know it. Instead of fixing the problem and getting in and getting your alignment checked. By the way, I don't know when I'm out of alignment. I got to lay on my stomach. I have to have a chiropractor come. They feel my back for those, because I don't know it either. I'm no different. Just because I'm a chiropractor, I don't have this knowledge of when I'm out of alignment. I know better than some. However, I still need to be checked. And they check my range of motion. My neck goes up and down. They check my muscles really quick, your leg muscles, your feet. And then you lay on your stomach and they feel the bones of your back. And if one of them's tender and it's affecting, that could be a misalignment or a subluxation. And they also, they check my leg length, because when you have a tightness of your back, we're always in this balance. One side becomes tighter than the other. And when you lay in your stomach, it shows as a short leg. And that could be from a pelvic twist of your pelvis. It could be from a twist because you hit your head and you knocked your skull a little bit out of alignment. All these bones can move around. And when they get knocked out, they got to be put back into place. It's pretty simple. So that's my deal about chiropractic. Now, if you're interested in getting in and seeing a chiropractor, I have no shortage of family members that are chiropractors. My brother, Dr. Todd Rissacker, and Dr. Caroline Rissacker are practicing in Jensen Beach, right there at the intersection of Jensen Beach Boulevard and US 1, across from the Treasure Coast Square Mall, kind of right across from, what is that seafood restaurant, Red Lobster. But they're in the plaza, and it's where the the Hobby Lobby and the Buffalo Wings, and then that Makita Buffet. Now, the Makita Buffet is where everybody's getting ready to come into my laser spa for body sculpting, because there's no shortage of food in there. And but they're in that plaza, and you can go in, and usually consultations, if you call up, are no charge to see if they can help you. And of course, there's fees involved with exams and x-rays and things like that. But as far as going in and finding out, we have a pretty open policy that there's really no charge to find out if we can help. And all fees will be explained ahead of time. And I'm actually going to be moving. I'm going to be there on Thursdays, Dr. Tread. I'm going to be there on Thursdays only. And I'm going to be seeing patients that have more complicated conditions. One of my specialties is being able to bring in different approaches to complicated problems, and and then doing it with almost kind of like you might do a rehab or something. You need 30 days, or you need 6 weeks, or you might need 8 weeks or 12 weeks, which would be 3 months. If somebody has a really serious health crisis, let's say you're 60 years old or 50 or 65 or 70, and you've had a history of back pain, and your back has what they call lots of spinal arthritis, spondylosis. Maybe you've had some disc herniations, some repairs, some bone grafts, to try to stabilize your spine. And yet, the nerves that leave the spine are now been damaged, and you're starting to show signs of neuropathy, which can come from spinal problems uncorrected, or even ones that are corrected. But as you get older, the spine degenerates. The weight of the spine starts to degenerate. And then at the same time, we fall off of our ability to exercise. Sometimes we're been put on medications, and we've been basically poisoned with pharmaceutical drugs so much, because trying to alleviate the symptoms and trying to reduce the swelling and to try to, have something to knock out the pain, you end up with something to sleep, something to wake up. And then over time, we start to gain weight. Our muscles get weak, our stomachs get sloppy, and the abdominal area loosens up and basically allows that stomach to come forward, and that's pulling on the spine. And now we have, because body fat over 25% is inflammatory, it's a serious health condition. It turns into something called metabolic syndrome. And metabolic syndrome occurs today, it's like 50% of adults are going to have metabolic syndrome. I have metabolic syndrome. And what it is it's basically when your metabolism has been hurt and it doesn't function as well, and you end up with weight gain. So a belly of over 40 inches, if you're a man, and 35 inches is considered, one part of metabolic syndrome. And that would be a big belly. And we're not measuring by your waist, guys. We're measuring where the belly button is. Same with a woman. And then the other one is that you have hyperglycemia. In other words, your blood sugar is too high. And you might not even know it. I had hyperglycemia for several years, had no idea that I had hyperglycemia. I assumed that the sweating and the thirst was more due to living in South Florida. I'm very active. And then one day I had some vision issues, and I was miserable, and I decided I would check my blood sugar. And I went to CVS and bought a little blood sugar glucose monitor, and I couldn't believe my blood sugar was over 300. And that was my journey. That was the beginning of my journey into, understanding diabetes and metabolic syndrome. And, I'm very sensitive to that because I suffered with it, and I still do. So metabolic syndrome is when you have a big belly and your high blood sugar, and also your cholesterol is elevated. You have a lot of triglycerides or fatty acids in your bloodstream. So you're going to have triglycerides are elevated. And it is also has to do with having being put on a blood pressure medication. And of course, eventually insulin resistance. Now, when you combine that with a guy or female who has been suffering with back alignment issues most of their lives, even if they went to chiropractors, and that spine is degenerating, those discs are getting thinner as you get older. You're starting to form arthritis and bone spurs. And gosh darn it, it's a complicated case. This is not something that an injection in your back is going to fix. You go get a nerve block or something, and that's not going to fix it. It's structural. It's metabolic. It's inflammatory. You're full of toxins and poisons from all the drugs and the medications and the bad food you've been eating, which is real common, and your glandular system is screwed up because of the toxins. So your sexual hormones are down, your fight or flight is in full gear, that nervous system, which protects you from being hurt, the fight or flight is in full, it's dominating. And when your fight or flight is dominating, your pressure is high, you don't want to eat food. You can't think of long-term problems. You don't need to think of problems when you're fighting the tiger. Your blood gets thick, and so you end up with thick blood. You have extra blood sugar because the sugar needs to make the muscles work. That's what stress is. It's a fight or flight response, and we're only designed to be in it for a short time. At the watering hole, either we get eaten or we run or we fight. It's done. But because humans can create that scenario again and again with their memories, and by watching and choosing to be in fight or flight, they're in this constant state of hypersensitivity to so much of their body's health. And now they're 60 years old, 65. They've worked their lives away, and they come to Florida to retire. And you know what? Their day involves going to the doctor. Well, maybe it's a little pickleball, or maybe it's golfing, but, alcohol starts to become more prevalent. I remember when they were working, they weren't drinking, but now that they're retired, out come the bedroom slippers, and we can get on with, having a couple of extra drinks. Now you're not as active. And all of these health things that have accumulated really make us not feel well. And you know, we really are sick. And truthfully, you are sick. So what I'm able to do as a chiropractor and a guy with a laser that gets rid of body fat and someone with a degree in, you know, nutrition based on the fact that I'm a chiropractor and I understand functional medicine, I can look at all of your meds that you come in, and some people have several pages and make recommendations to see doctors to maybe, you know, let's look at those meds. You know, a lot of it is due to the metabolic syndrome, the high blood sugar, the high blood glucose, the body fat being high, the cholesterol being high, the heart pressure being raised. Those are drugs you're put on because of metabolic syndrome. You know, lose some weight, strengthen, get some muscle tone back, do a little gentle cleansing, you know, with foods, basically fruits and vegetables and some supplements, and then handle the outer fat with laser and red light, which are super beneficial. You can change that whole metabolic profile, you know, and depending on how long you've had it, depends on how long it takes. You know, I'm saying 3 months for most. I did it in 3 months. And once I finished it, guess what? I had to be vigilant and do it again. In other words, you're not over. It's health is something that either you're moving towards health or you're moving away from health. There's no medium point. You don't stop halfway and you're oh, I'm good, I don't have to do anything else. No. It's always getting worse or it's getting better. And those are based on the decisions you make every single day. I watched a show with Travis Stork, the medical doctor who's on the show, Doctors. And he had a great statement. He said, you know, when you get up, you have to make a decision to be healthy, you know, 300 times a day. I was like, what? That's I didn't understand. He says, well, think about it. Are you going to, you know, when you get up in the morning, you know, are you going to shave? You know, are you going to brush your teeth? That's a decision you make. Are you going to shower? Or maybe you showered at night, but are you showering daily? Have you, you know, did you eat the right type of food? Did you make a good choice as far as food goes? Did you drink some water or did you just drink coffee? That's another decision you'd have to make for your health. You know, did you floss? Do you floss daily? Or maybe you floss only when you go to the dentist, right? You know, are you aware of your skincare? You know, are you full of blackheads and pimples and sebaceous cysts that you just ignore? Or do you go to somewhere to have them cleaned and take care of your skin? You know, are you managing how much food you eat every single at your intervals, you know, at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or whatever that is? Are you managing the amount of calories? Do you even know how many calories you can burn? Your caloric max amount, which is what I teach at the spa, you know, and you haven't even left the house yet. Did you take your vitamins? Supplements are really important nowadays. It isn't like it used to be where food contained all these nutrients. Food's like cardboard. It's colored and they put sugar and fat on it, and there's very little nutrition in the food we eat. Even when we buy organic, by the way. Organic doesn't mean that it was grown again and again in the same ground. I don't really know how they define organic. It's better than not. So you don't get the same supplements. What else are we not doing? You know, are we keeping our toes and our toenails cut? You can avoid cutting toenails, have an ingrown, you know, nail and lose your toe over it. Are you exercising? And I don't mean exercise like going to the gym. That would one way, but are you moving? Are you getting up and moving enough every day in every way, every joint, every day in every way? You know, are you putting on your seatbelt when you get to your car? Let me ask you, did you buy a safe car? You're driving some little, you know, car that's you're trying to save money, and because the gas is so cheap, and there's guys driving around in big Ford F-150s and F-250s and Teslas, those cars will win in an accident. I promise you. A Tesla weighs double what a normal car weighs. And when two cars smack each other and one weighs double the other one, the one that weighs the most is going to push the one that's little right out of the way. And that's the truth. I shudder when I see people in these small cars scooting through through the roads and around the corners, and on 95, not using their blinkers. It's incredible. In other words, we're not even to work yet. Are you going to work in an environment where you're being poisoned, where there's gas and there's smoke and there's fumes? And are you going to work with paints and thinners? This is how we get poisoned from toxins. And so again, you have to make the decision if you want to live long and be healthy. Now, there's something that was brought up to me at a podcast that I listened to. His name is Dr. Peter Attia. He's an MD, Attai. I get a lot of information from him. Same with Andrew Huberman, who is the Huberman's podcast, Lab Podcast, and Peter Attia, MD. And, Peter had talked about something called health span. Now, I mean, obviously, I know what lifespan is, and most of you do, is how long you're going to live. It's going to be 60, 70, 80. What's your lifespan? Well, he says, and this is true, you want your health span to be equal to your lifespan. You don't want a long lifespan with a short health span. You think about that for a second. That is really, really important, because if your health craps out by the time you're 50 and you're going to live to be 90, my God, that's 40 years of suffering and going to doctors and taking meds and not doing the things you want to do, and and assuming that this is just the way my life should be. And that is what I see happening a lot, more than I think we ever have in our whole existence as a humanity. I mean, people's lifespans were done when they were 60, 62. Remember that song, Will You Still Love Me? Will You Still Talk to Me when I'm 60? What is it, 64? That's when people were considered done. Now we're living into our 70s and 80s and playing pickle. We're much more active. But I would tell you that our health span has suffered because we're on medications to keep it that way. Taking blood pressure meds and not getting to the cause of why you have high blood pressure is a fool's errand. I mean, you have to do it. Don't get me wrong, but you need to find out why. And if you're taking pain pills or pills because your back hurts, or you're popping NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, Advil and ibuprofens and these things, and because your knee hurts when you go shopping and it takes away the pain, and you haven't really got to why the knee is hurting, and maybe the musculature is weak, maybe your alignment's out with your back, maybe you're putting too much weight on your body and your knee hurts. So taking an NSAID, yeah, it gives you 2 or 3 hours of relief, but the degenerative condition is still there. That's going to affect your health span, not your lifespan, how well you function. And and that's my criticism with drugs. All right, so we're going to take a really quick short break here, because I'm limited to a 30-minute time frame on this camera, and I think we're about out. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to finish up with actually my weight loss 101 of what you have to do to stay fit and to lose weight, as I teach in my office. Okay, it's very informative. It makes a lot of sense, and I enjoy doing it because I'm good at it. I've done it for a while. So we'll see if we get chopped off here by my camera. I think it's going to click off in about 3 seconds. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to come back. Hey, and we're back. Imagine that. I shut it off, turned it on, and we're back. Woohoo! All right, you guys, my wonderful thousands of people that listen and have been waiting for me to get back on the air. I appreciate it. This is my first live show I've done, and I'm getting back to the basics here, okay? So let's talk about weight loss and about food and choices. Okay. And I am not the kind of doctor that gives you a list of what you can eat and can't eat. This is what you have to eat. This is what you shouldn't. I mean, there's things which you need to eat. And the first one is you need protein. I mean, do not ever discredit the importance of protein. Your body is a muscular machine. Your muscles move your body. They power your body. They allow you to work. They allow you to play. It's what gets you up out of bed. All of the little muscles in your body are what move the fluids through the body. Your heart is a pump. There's the organs of your digestive tract. There's a huge muscular tube which moves things through your body and peristaltic actions. These are muscular contractions. A muscle is made of amino acids, and amino acids are what protein is. So I think there's 24 amino acids. There's like 3 or 4. We have to eat amino acids. We don't get them from the vegetables. Not much. You can get some amino acids from vegetable proteins. However, if you're a vegan and you want to eat enough protein to build muscle back, compared to someone who's eating meat, you'd have to eat 4 bowls of beans, 4 bowls of beans to make up what you can get from like less than half a pound of beef. All right. And the protein that comes from the plants, it's not complete amino acids. It doesn't have all the 24 amino acids you need. So it's missing some. So you have to supplement that. And now the other thing about protein is your body is a protein manufacturing machine. And as a result of the COVID and the mRNA vaccination that they're freaking jab, I don't know what to call it. Very upset over that, but that's a whole nother topic. We started to learn that our bodies make proteins, and the idea behind that COVID injection is they've taken the DNA, the RNA, messenger RNA, which is the blueprint for things. It can be a blueprint for proteins. And they have determined what the protein is for what they call a spike protein. And then that blueprint is injected into your body. And it's those little RNAs are wrapped in little fatty packets. It's a nano lipo technology. So they're taking that little protein, that mRNA, and they're wrapping it in a little piece of fat ball, small piece of fat, and that allows it to travel into the cell very easily. And once it goes into a cell, now it could be a muscle cell, it could be the cells of your reproductive system, it could be your those fetal cells, it could be a nerve cell, it could be other cells. What happens is when that mRNA goes into that cell, it hijacks and takes over that cell's protein manufacturing system. Every cell manufactures proteins. That's what we do. That's what allows us to build muscle, to build bone, to build tissue. Everything we build is by our body's cells manufacturing proteins. Your emotions, your neurological, all of your hormones are all produced as proteins by these cells. And the mRNA technology is injecting you with a dosage of RNA and hoping it's not going to take over all of your cells and only hijack a few. They used to say it was around where the injection site is. In other words, it stays in that muscle. Well, we know that's not true. It collects in metabolically active tissues, such as the heart, and in the sexual glands, in the what they call the fetal tissue. So, however, those proteins also are what make muscles. And in order to build muscle, when you exercise and use muscles energy, you tear muscle, you break it down. And the way it's rebuilt is with amino acids from the food you eat. So protein is like really, really important for health and wellness. I mean, I'll go over exactly what's included in carbohydrates and what we get from that in a second. But the protein is quite amazing. Now, everything I'm telling you here, I'm not reading from a book. This is just my own knowledge and memory. I might not be perfect. Don't beat me up over it, but I can tell you protein is your friend with weight loss. If there's one thing that we have made in the spa to make a change of people is to get them to start eating more protein. It's really that simple, And protein comes from animals, or it comes from certain vegetables which are high in protein. And that would be your green leafy vegetables. All right. So the other major food group, which is important to understand, are what we call the carbohydrates. So there's protein, there's carbohydrates, and there's fats. Okay, now what's interesting about proteins are there's no good or bad proteins. Okay, protein is protein. Now there's protein that, meat that's not good for you, like cold cuts and salamis, because they put so much other stuff in. It's processed. But as far as the protein goes, all protein is pretty good. You don't have bad proteins and good ones. You might have poor sources of protein where you're not getting much from it. However, protein is a good thing. So when it comes to carbohydrates, that would be plants in the form of vegetables or fruit. Okay. If it's got wings and it's got lips and it runs around on the ground or swims in the ocean or flies through the air, it is not a carbohydrate. Okay. Period. Case closed. And carbohydrates, because they're wheats and grains and flours and fruits and anything that's, carbohydrate now is something that is a building, it's everywhere. And what people have done, what humanity has done, is in an effort to make money, because money seems to be the fuel that powers everything. They have taken carbohydrates, which are very healthy and good for you, and they have concocted them and they have made them into something that really isn't healthy anymore. And they've done that by processing it. And I'll explain why processing is so bad for food in 1 second. And that is a major problem with our food industry right now, is those beautiful corn and vegetables and broccolis and wheats. Once you strip them of all their nutrients and once you process them, you've destroyed the energy within that food. You've devitalized it, and it turned into basically like almost toxic for you. Your body has to work to get rid of it instead of giving you life. So carbohydrates, there's good ones and there's bad ones. And a good carb is one that is natural and it occurs as close to the root as possible. In other words, it's fresh. And then a bad carb would be any carbohydrate which has been removed from the root for a long time. It's no longer part of, it isn't natural. It's been bleached. It's been pulverized. It's been baked. It's been, it's been mixed with other chemicals and stuff. These become what we call bad carbs. All right. And I'll explain a little bit why this is it's very interesting, by the way. I mean, really interesting. And when you understand this, you'll really realize what food choices you should eat and shouldn't eat. It's really obvious if you understand why we're eating food. Okay. And we got to talk about fats. Fats are really important. There's certain structures in your body which are made of fat. And it doesn't mean the fatty cells that are holding fat. That's part of it. But Your cell membranes, we're made up of individual tissue cells. There's heart cells and blood cells and muscle cells and all these different cells in our body. And a cell membrane, the surrounding of a cell, which holds all the contents within it, is a phospholipid membrane. It is a fatty membrane. But you need to eat fat to have good cellular health, because that's what makes the cells. It's also a lubrication for your body. It lubricates the joints. If you're not getting enough fats, and you're not lubricating, and you'll have much more of a chance of having arthritis and other problems, because you're not getting enough of the oils. Oils are also a very good source of energy. They can be absorbed directly into the tissue without having to go through the glucose insulin route. All right. Carbohydrates, because they're starches, are sugars, and they have to be converted to glucose by the body. And then that brings them into the cell with insulin. So there's a whole process to do that. And fats, however, and proteins do not require insulin to go into the cell. They can be absorbed directly into the cell, and then your cell can get the energy from that substance without having to rely on the glucose pathway. So that's called gluconeogenesis. So, you got diabetes, your body isn't handling sugar anymore. Your body's become resistant to the insulin, so you have high blood sugar. Carbohydrates make blood sugar, and that would be simple and bad carbs. So proteins and fats don't raise your blood sugar because they're not broken into sugar. So you want to eat a diet that's friendly and restricts insulin, a diabetic friendly diet, cut out those carbohydrates. That's the way it goes. If you're eating something which always raises your blood sugar, and that's your main intake, that's not good. So having a diet that's high in protein and good fats and very low in carbohydrate, as long as you're not overeating the amount, which is, you got to come to a doctor to figure that out. You're not really good. You shouldn't have. Why would you have insulin problems? Why would you have diabetes? Because you're not raising your blood sugar the same. And that's really, that's just kind of like a rule of thumb. You don't have to know nutrition, but there's some rules of thumb that I'm gonna summarize here near the end of this. Okay. And so that's why we eat fats. Fats aren't making you fat, everybody, nor is protein, unless you're overeating your daily amount. And that we got to talk about. All right. So, you're listening to Dr. Trev Rissacker. I'm the doctor at the Slim Body Laser Spa, and I specialize in complicated cases, people that have, weight gain, disc problems, neuropathy, difficulty exercising, metabolic syndrome, 80, not 80%, 50% of you is out there. I have a ability to do chiropractic. I have ability to get rid of that body fat using the lasers. And I also have a whole program of nutrition and detoxification. And it's a plan. It's a program which has a beginning and an end. And it's something that I apply, and it's done kind of like an outpatient, and I'd love to be able to take you into a beautiful resort somewhere in Costa Rica and keep you for 3 months and offer all those services. Everybody gets better there, but we have to live in our world. So part of what I do is I can direct you to these different professionals, all who will handle each part of this problem. The blood sugar, the diabetes, the nutrition, the body fat reduction, which is, we're doing the chiropractic, and also the decompression tables. They work really well. Excuse me. So let's get back to this thing about diet. All right. Now, this is a really important thing to understand if you want to have a longer health span along with a long lifespan. You want to match. Okay. We eat food to give us energy. Okay. Food is our energy. Just like the gasoline that you put in your car powers your car from to Fort Pierce or to Louisiana, right? It doesn't care. It's fuel. It's fossil fuel, actually. It's the same thing that starch was made of many years ago. Remember, starch is a two carbon molecule linked together, and fossil fuels have 5 carbons and 8 carbons. They call them propane and hexane and octane. At one point, they were starch laying in the ground, and pressure and time and millions of years made those carbons link together, and that's how we get fossil fuel. So fuel and petroleum is very similar in structure to the food you eat, is my point. So our food comes from, our energy comes from the food we eat. And I ask people, what part of the food do you think, how do you think you get energy from the food? Well, we chew it. It's the car, it's the, whether it's a vegetable. I'm like, no. Where does the energy coming from? We know what's in the food, and it's, most people don't know it. And it's really simple. The energy that you need to make your body move and grow and do everything you've ever wanted to do, and it's the same for the whole planet, it comes from the sun. Okay? The sun. That thermonuclear reactor out there, which is 1 billion times stronger than any thermal, nuclear we've seen, is spewing out radiant energy in the form of energy, pure energy. And it radiates from the sun. And early on, when the sun was there and we weren't, it has such mass that particles of dust and dirt and minerals swirl around it because it has mass, and from that particles, that's how they feel the planets formed. The planets formed because they struck together, they got dense, and as it rotated around the sun, it starts to absorb the sun, and the sunlight is what brings the minerals. And from the minerals, it also has to do with the attraction of and repulsion and attraction, which is the very basis of life, is positive and negative. Sun's an electrical generator. It also is what plants use to live. So the plant gets struck by the radiant light from the sun, and with chlorophyll and some other things very unique to a plant, they can turn that energy into a starch. They capture radiant energy, and when they make starch, which is a carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, a long chain of carbons and nitrogens and things, the starch molecule, those molecules are held together by pure sunlight in the form of radiant energy, which is turned into chemical energy by the plant. Okay? You getting with me there? All right. So now, how do we get the energy? We eat the plant. We eat the starch. So when you have a plant that has starch, it's a live food, it's naturally grown, it has a lot of energy because it's fresh. It has the energy still there. But what happens if that plant, you come back a week later, it's been pulled out of the roots, it's dead, it's decaying. Is there still energy there? A little bit, but not as much as when it was healthy, because the starches held that energy. So we eat the starch, it goes into we chew it, break it up, our stomach breaks apart with different acids and different substances that, these things which break up tissue, and it releases some of that energy into the body, but most of it goes into the cell as glucose, which is that same energy trapped now in a sugar molecule. So starch to sugar, holding that energy. And when we take that glucose into our bloodstream and it goes into the cell, it releases ATP. ATP is the energy that your body needs every single moment, every cell, every single massive amounts of ATP. Without ATP, life ceases to happen. And ATP is the end product of sunlight coming into a plant, radiant, turning into chemical in a starch. We eat the starch and we get the energy from it. So who doesn't want more energy? I want more energy. I love energy. I think it's great. However, am I eating it? I can't get it. The sunlight does give you energy, by the way. It's a whole nother topic, because our bodies do respond to sunlight in many, many ways that we're just starting to understand. It's part of our circadian rhythm. It helps with sleep. It helps with waking and sleeping. Melatonin is produced in the dark. It goes away in sunlight. Red light and yellow light in the morning is very beneficial for us when it hits our body and our eyes. It helps to calm down the nervous system. It helps repair tissue. It is so much stuff they're just starting to understand. Yet, what have they been teaching you for the last 30 or 40 years? Stay out of the sun. Wear sunglasses. Cover up. You don't want to die of skin cancer. Now, I agree. I do not want to die of skin cancer. But you see, I'm a little more tuned up, because I look and say, well, if you take 100 people and you shine a light on them and keep them in the sun all the time, only 2 or 3 are going to get cancer. Why didn't the other ones get it? What's happening? Well, is it that they got overdosed? No, they have a system which is in some way vulnerable to getting cancer. They have a devitalized system, an immune system which isn't functioning properly and allowed this to happen. I mean, it's about the host, not the exposure. However, I don't cook myself every day. That would be a foolish thing to do. But I'm not hiding from the sun because I'm scared of getting cancer all the time. So, but that sunlight that went into the starch that we ate is really important. So here's the first rule. Try to eat food that is as close to nature and live as possible, as close to the root as you can get it. And that would be in the form of vegetables and fruits. Okay? Now, how do we get energy from protein? Remember, we also eat proteins, and that would be animals. Well, here's what happens. This is pretty easy. Guess what? The animal ate the starch before you. All right. The animal ate the starch, ate the grass, ate the vegetable, whatever it ate. It ate it. And when we make muscle, when we make muscle out of protein, it requires a lot of energy to hold those bonds together. So that energy from the starch is actually helping the muscle, the amino acids, to hold together. Now, the amino acid doesn't have the same amount of energy that comes from starch. However, when it's aligned in a piece of muscle with strands of amino acids and protein strands, and then you have mitochondria that contract and relax and contract and relax, that energy is coming from the starches and the glucose. So, rule number 1, eat live food. If it's processed, if it comes in a box, if it doesn't go bad, if you leave it out on the counter, and it's really not good for you. Try to avoid it as best as you can. I know you can't get rid of all of it, but do your best to limit your amount of processed food, and you'll have a much lesser chance of having metabolic syndrome and diabetes and everything else. All right. Now, I hope that makes sense. That's what I teach at the office. Now, what happens is we really, our best skill is to store fat, is to make fat. We hold a lot of body fat. The human holds close to 20 to 25% body fat naturally. And not our ancestors, but other animals, mammals, which are live fur-bearing animals. We had fur once, I guess. I don't know. They say we're a mammal. Most of them only have body fat of between 3 and 5%. You know, an ape, a chimpanzee, a monkey, unless they're domesticated, they're very lean. And they have traded muscle, they've traded fat for muscle. So they have to always be following the food. They got to be looking for it. You know, it's 24/7 because they don't have that much fat. They can't hide. However, they're very strong and they have to defeat that way. Now, the human who has to live with monkeys is very weak and can't fight monkeys, really, or any creature like that. We can't. We just don't have the strength because we have too much body fat. And so you say to yourself, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Well, here's a fact. It's something that your body, you know, we're here. So you find your perfect place. Your tribe found the trees and there's fruit and you've got a place to sleep and the monkeys show up. I mean, and these monkeys will, you know, they're going to kill you if you stop them. And you're like, I got to hide. I can't fight these. So you're smart enough to hide. Most animals understand that, but a human understands it and knows why he's hiding. They have an instinct to hide, but we know why, right? Because we can't survive. We can't fight them. And I have enough body fat to stay hidden for a long time. In other words, my body fat stores will allow me to stay hidden depending on how much fat I bring in with me. And average human right now, 3 minutes without oxygen, we die. 3 to 5 days without water, we die. And you can go 3 months, most of us, without any food at all before we are near death. Okay. And some who have prepared for that can go a lot longer than 3 months without eating any food at all. So, and this is why we have body fat. We carry our fat with us. We don't have to bring our food with us if we have to run. So it's been a really strong evolutionary edge. And for that reason, we have a tendency of making fat much easier than we do getting rid of fat. Because it's easy to put it on. You can make fat. You can make 3 pounds of fat a day, okay? At least 1 to 2 pounds of fat a day without a problem. It can take you 1 to 2 months to burn a fat or 2 pounds of fat, and that you made it in a day. So this is why we're so overweight. Now, the other reason why we're completely morbidly obese is that we're never stopping eating. We're not taking the winter off. Your ancestors took the winter off. It was cold. There wasn't a lot of food. In other words, they starved. And when they got out of the wherever they were at hiding, they had to eat food again. And then they put weight on in the summer. Then they lose it in the winter. That's a healthy, normal cycle for human. What's not normal is keeping the same fat winter after winter after winter. And that's what's causing all the breakdowns that we see in people's health. All right. So I'm about done with my little talk here. I hope you enjoyed it. It is my first time in my own studio and I'm enjoying it. So my name is Dr. Rissacker. I can be reached at the Slim Body Laser Spa here in Stuart, Florida. It's 772-223-5885. I have a very unusual name, Dr. Tred, T-R-E-D. If you say that into your phone or you do it on your computer, you're going to be put right to my office because there's only one Dr. Tred out there. And I'd love to help you. I always offer free consultations. Give me a call. I love to, I'm out to help people. So don't ever think that we won't. Anyway, it's nice. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I will see you very, very soon. I'm going to get a schedule here real soon and I'll talk about it.